This is one that I actually thought I would dislike a lot based on what I saw in the trailer, but as it went on, it gradually grew on me. The King of Staten Island is a semi-autobiographical movie loosely based around Pete Davidson's life and upbringing on Staten Island. It tells the story of 24-year-old Scott, a dude who never graduated high school, never went to college, and never really did anything in general. He spends all his time just kicking it with the boys. Oh. You can't tell, but I have like my feet kicked up on the table and like a brewski in my hand vibes. So evidently not that different from his character in Big Time Adolescence. And then Scott gets hit with a bunch of wake-up calls that essentially force him to figure out his life. His younger sister goes off to college, his widowed mother ends up dating another guy, and all his friends go down separate paths, which ends up leaving him kind of isolated and feeling lost and then on the search for what he wants to do with his life. So in those regards, it kind of felt like a coming-of-age movie, except the interesting thing was that it was happening to a 24-year-old, not a 17-year-old. And the main character, Scott, is heavily centered around Pete Davidson, from the loss of his father, the firefighter as a central theme, to the on-screen depiction of just an average run-of-the-mill stoner. And I think those are some of Pete Davidson's biggest strengths, because rather than, being portrayed as this larger-than-life guy who can do anything, he represents someone who just lives a very normal life and takes on the hardships of life one by one. Now, when I first saw the trailer, I thought, okay, here's a movie whose source material was taken straight from, Twitter. It seemed like the main character was just every dude who gets made fun of on Twitter. I mean, he perfectly fit the archetype of the skinny white dude who has zero emotional intelligence, who constantly gets high and then talks about his demons and actually refers to them as demons. And at first I was like, okay, here's an uninspired movie that's basically just gonna take a bunch of cheap jabs at the internet's depiction of Chad, which is a joke that's already been played out so many times on the internet. Not saying it's a bad joke, because I actually think the Chad jokes are fucking hilarious. I just feel like, again, there should be some kind of separation between the internet and movies. But in the end, this movie actually grew on me, a lot. What started out as a movie about a character I really didn't want to empathize with ended up being a really heartwarming story. And as I did more research on Pete Davidson's life and all that, the main character actually grew on me way more as well. It's kind of like when your friend describes someone to you and you're like, that sounds like someone I would not get along with at all. And then you meet them and you're actually like, wait, you're not so bad. You're actually kind of cool, what? And I feel like this approach is something that Judd Apatow uses a lot. Take Superbad, for example. If you try to tell someone what this movie's about, and more specifically what the characters are like, it won't sound that good, and people will probably question your movie taste. Yeah, basically it's a bunch of teenagers trying to get laid. And then, friendship and stuff. But then once you watch the movie yourself, you realize it's not as stupid as it sounds, and it's actually pretty heartwarming. And of course, the humor in Judd Apatow's movies usually holds up pretty well, at least for me personally. I feel like a lot of it is just self-mockery that makes fun of the outcasts of the world, which is something that myself and a lot of others can relate to. And in doing so, you humanize the characters and make them way more relatable than, Tom Cruise or not everyone can be the characters Brad Pitt plays, but a whole lot of people can be the characters Jonah Hill plays. That's right, I'm talking about you. And all these elements found their way through the movie, eventually, but it took a while to get there. It felt like the first half of the movie was just red flag after red flag. A lot of the dialogue felt like it was just super lazy writing. Something this movie did a lot was it would smack you in the face with exposition. Typically, you want your exposition to come out through subtleties and conflict. But this movie was here you go! Here's a bunch of information about the characters on a silver platter. Yes, and here we have the character's age, their fears, desires, past trauma, melodramatic backstory. Enjoy. There were so many lines that stated something that should already be super obvious to the characters, but for the sake of exposition, they would try to slide it in a completely non-discreet way. Hey Scott! Hey Kelsey! What's up? Oh, nothing. Just thinking about how my dad was a firefighter and died 17 years ago. That's crazy. Did you know we've known each other since we were 10 years old? What's even crazier is my name is Scott, and your name is Kelsey. News to me! Whoa! Also, I was a little confused because everybody had like a super thick Staten Island accent except Pete Davidson. Like, you could tell he had some New York in his voice. I mean, obviously he is from there, but everyone else was just like somewhere between like the Staten Island and the Jersey Shore. And like I said, these were all things that bothered me for the first like 45 minutes, maybe an hour. But then all those problems ended up growing on me. Something about this movie and the super flawed characters really resonated with me. And I think it was the movie's ability to highlight people's flaws in a non-critical way. It was the whole finding beauty in our scars thing. Basically, it was like, you have these super dysfunctional families and relationships, but in those relationships is a bond that no one else outside of the relationship can understand. On top of that, the cast was pretty good too. You have Pete Davidson playing a character who was pretty much tailored to him and his personality perfectly. Bill Burr giving a super authentic, gritty performance. Steve Buscemi, who was a real-life firefighter playing a seasoned firefighter. Marissa Tomei playing a character who I didn't even realize was Marissa Tomei because of how good she was. And a whole bunch of others. There weren't really any performances that I thought fell short or were underwhelming. They were all right in the pocket of where they should have been. So even with all the flaws that I found in the beginning, I thought the raw energy and strong cast actually made up for them in the end. I think this is a story that anyone can connect to because it is a story that could quite literally happen to anyone. Dare I say I got a little inspired myself by the story once it was all said and done. And once you sit with the movie for a few days and really let those ideas resonate with you, you're able to see Pete Davidson's unique voice actually shine through. And one of the reasons it's a unique voice is because he is someone who you either love or hate. I went into this movie thinking I hated Pete Davidson, but now I actually really like his work. So I'm going to give The King of Staten Island an 8 out of 10. It has its flaws, sure, but those flaws are made up for, and it just, I don't know, it's a super feel-good movie, and at the end of the day, I came to judge and left impressed. So, let me know what you think. Agree, disagree, whatever. If you liked the video, go ahead and leave a like and subscribe. And if you disliked the video, go ahead and leave a like anyway and subscribe later.